How is everyone tonight? And it is a beautiful night here in Chicago, Illinois, broadcasting to about 833,000 residents from the Mephistophelian Crossroads, or otherwise known as the Hipster Highway, along Milwaukee, up on the top floor overlooking the Loop and spectacular view of the jammed up traffic out there. Tonight's been very interesting and kind of elusive. I've had some odd occurrences with the supernatural and in this space that has disrupted the gear, made things fall out of the ceiling, interesting electrical vibrations and disruptions. But my guest is not going to make it, and I was going to have a very intensive discussion about the JFK assassination. And my take on the JFK assassination is that I do think, from the assassin's perspective, that there is some type of conspiracy. I have, and still do, have some questions as to why Oswald, if he was a zealot, and if he was so intensely dedicated to his Communist Manifesto, why would he want to come out when he was brought out, shot down by that man Ruby, and why would he announce that he was a patsy? It doesn't make any sense, and it defies logic. And from that, clearly, if you're watching the Zapruder film, which others have watched and said it's an altered document, which is very possible. In my opinion, I see a delay and then a shot from the front. So if Oswald is positioned in the rear book depository building, if he is firing from that window, how is it that in watching the Zapruder film, and I highly recommend that people look that up on YouTube and analyze it for themselves, that they see this other secondary or third or fourth shot coming from the frontal area, which would mean that there was another shooter out there somewhere. And I am the most ardent anti-conspiratorial person around. I don't think in waves like that. I'm a psychic. I solve problems, and I see things, through a very skeptical eye. But clearly, in watching that particular film, the Zapruder film, and I think it's like section 300 or something, you can clearly see some kind of frontal shot which would discount that Oswald was working alone, let alone coming out, being brought out to the public and saying, I'm a patsy. If he was, going back to what I was talking about, a patsy, then why would he, even say that? Why would he do that? He obviously realized what was going on when it was going on. He may have been up there. He may have been shooting. He also may have realized there were other shots being fired, and immediately he knew the game was up. He knew that someone was setting him up and framing him. So he left the book depository building, but there was also some things about that said he was hesitating, he was drinking a Coca-Cola, that he was relaxing. So witness statements even kind of contradict whether he was a shooter at all. But his behavior is not that of a zealot. Because if he was a zealot when he was brought out, he wouldn't have announced that he was a patsy. He would have said, from a psychological judgment on my part and psychic judgment on my part, and seeing how zealots are, he would have said nothing. He would have been hardened, or he would have announced that, yes, I am this man. Yes, I did shoot this president. I am proud of it. But instead, he is brought out in this odd way, and paraded in front of the public, which is odd, exposed basically, and then is he himself assassinated by Jack Ruby. And that just, it doesn't settle well. It just does not make sense. In looking at what Jack Ruby had, he was mob connected. He had some strip club. He owed debts. He himself was also dying. So he basically had nothing to lose. I am a little bit perplexed by it. And it just doesn't make sense to me. And I want it to. You know, I want to be a believer that America is all good and that there are no problems with it. But then I know that that is a lie. Because from seeing everything that I have seen, the rabbit hole goes pretty deep.
Un trombone a colis. Un trombone can sordina. J'aime le son du trombone en sourdine. J'ai le son. A muted trumpet. It's all recorded. No, Panda! It is all a tape. Il n'est pas d'orchestre. It is an illusion. Listen.
Streaming live at QUE4.org at winterlake.com. It's going to be a wild ride tonight. I'm in a very interesting mood. There's been a lot of darkness going around. A lot of interesting interludes with different individuals that I've been speaking with. Meeting them in different places on the train or on the street. Having something to say or contacting me via the internet. I don't know. It's odd. Synchronicities. And if someone does want to speak to me, I will take calls. 773-217-8344. But I monitor them pretty hard and don't know if I want to speak to everyone. But if you do want to call, you can try the number. In looking at the JFK conspiracy, overall, there is thousands and if not millions of different documents. But in looking at it from the mind of the killer, it does not rationalize out correctly. Why would Oswald come out and say he was a patsy if he knew he was being framed? Why did he go to this movie theater? Who was he going to meet? How did they know so quickly that it was Oswald? That was huge, very rapid police work. unless they had already run fingerprints on something. But I am a marksman. And if you're a marksman, you're going to know to use something like gloves or coating, so you're not going to leave fingerprints. So I am unsure as to even how they apprehended him or knew to zero in on this man. It psychologically doesn't reason out. JFK was definitely trying to be an altruist in a time of man's inhumanity to man. It was the beginning of a lot, or possibly, or is, or was, a new dark age for America. There are so many different ends of his own family regime being connected to the mob. His own father was some kind of peddler of extremes, a member of organizations underground, and that could have led to some downfall. But why him? I mean, it's so unnecessary. If you kill the president, you're just cutting off a head of a serpent. You know, there's going to be the second in command right there. It's really not relevant. Unless it was the second in command who wanted the job the whole time, which in itself doesn't really reason out. If Lyndon B. Johnson, the Vice President of the United States, really went to such elaborate extremes, I think it would have come out by now. And all of these different other variables with all these different other people, this family tree of death that has occurred since the time of JFK's assassination, all within a year, and all of these things around that. I mean, people do die, but it just goes one to one to one. His brother, Bobby Kennedy, was killed shortly after that in a same similar fashion. Lone gunman, supposedly, shot down. And then even later, in looking at John Kennedy, his son, JFK's son, flying off with his golden wife in some flimsy little airplane right into the fog, that doesn't make any sense either. So there is clearly some kind of trail of death following these Kennedy people, and I don't think there's any of them left. Maybe it was Sam Giancana, was very involved in the mob at that time. He had some kind of vendetta, possibly with his people. They had known earlier, had made mentions that there was going to be a murder or assassination of the president. So it's just interesting how it all plays out. But I'm Winter Lake at winterlake.com at AM 1710, and I'm going to take a break. We are back. I am Winter Lake at winterlake.com, QUE4.org on AM 1710. And I have a call from Sid Yiddish, who is well known about the JFK conspiracy. How are you, Sid?
I'm great, Winter Lake. How are you?
Doing good, doing good. So, you know, I was thinking, I have these burning questions, obviously, you know, about it. And why do you think, from the killer's standpoint, did Oswald, in his initial announcement, come out and say, "I'm a patsy"?
Well, my guess is that he was probably targeted from the get-go, because, you know, he kept going back and forth from Russia to the United States, you know, back and forth, and so I'm certain that somebody was trying to put the screws on him, so he decided to announce it.
Yeah, so he's just like, you don't think he realized that the moment it went down that he was being framed, and that's why he just came out with "I'm a patsy"? Because if he was some zealot, wouldn't he have been proud of what he had done?
I don't think he was proud of what he had done. You know, he was probably told to do it, and you know, the moment he did, he realized what the consequences were, and of course, you know, Jack Ruby, who nailed him the next day, probably didn't want him to talk anymore.
And what is that connection with Jack Ruby? Why did he run up there and kill that guy?
Well, Jack Ruby, as you well know, owned a strip club there in Dallas, and he was well known with the local cops there, and so they didn't, you know, think twice about when he was back in that area, and he was probably, you know, set up, or he just came up and just they didn't even think twice, and then he grabbed him and you know, after he shot him, just to shut him up.
I mean, but why would they? I mean, why would they want to shut him up? He was connected to this guy for Ruby or something.
My guess is if they wanted to silence Oswald, you know, because if he said he's a patsy, that would probably open up a huge can of worms. And as you well know, the Warren Commission didn't let everybody know what was going on. You know, they only said that, yeah, Oswald acted alone. When, of course, there were so many witnesses to the contrary, and the witnesses were being silenced too. You know, as you well know.
What do you mean the witnesses? I mean, I'm just learning as I kind of go along. You know, I'm the most anti-conspiratorial person you could meet.
Well, there were witnesses. You know, when the president was coming down through that, you know, by the railroad passage there, by the book depository. I mean, there were witnesses on the ground there, you know, watching the president as you would watch somebody, you know, during a parade. You know, that's exactly what they were doing. Those were all the witnesses. Ironically, the witnesses were being told to shut up, or by somebody, possibly the CIA or possibly the police. And lo and behold, those witnesses started disappearing. I mean, there were over at that point. Between then and maybe through the 70s, there were perhaps over 300 people killed between 1963 to about maybe, maybe 70s, 80s. I'll go a little bit further. Several hundred people were killed.
You mean they were really just outrightly killed? I mean, people do die. I mean, that's not just...
Of course they do, but how is it that, say... somebody, like an accident just happens, a car just hits them. So I know there's a lot of things to do with fate and chance and you know, things like that, but I just find it very odd that all these people that saw it were either told, I mean, I feel they were told something, because the cops came around and were, you know, collecting things. The FBI too, and we're collecting things. You know that Zapruder film? You've seen the Zapruder film,
I have, but I question it because I heard it's been tampered with, that it's been framed out.
Yeah, it was, and they finally restored it. I mean, it's on YouTube if you watch it, and they show virtually everything on it. Obviously, they took things out because they didn't want the public to know.
And do you have any idea who they are? Is it just some kind of shadow government, or just individuals that want to seek power and money?
I honestly, I don't know, but what I can tell you is back in 2008, I played Ouija board at a show of mine. Back in those days, I was doing a lot of Ouija boards at my shows, and we did something on the 45th anniversary of JFK's assassination, and came up with some interesting answers. One answer was that Lee Harvey Oswald didn't act alone. The board answered that it said he had help from 5 Cuban killers.
Interesting.
And that was probably the biggest of evidence, knowing that, Oswald didn't act alone. I'd say there were a lot of things. I mean, there were a lot of people against him. He was warned not to go to Dallas. I mean, they considered him a traitor.
Right.
The mom hated him. There were a lot of people that just didn't like him because he wanted to change the world.
He was young. He was, full of vitriol and all this, and they wanted to kill him. And in your Ouija board experiment, it said that there were all these killers. How were they situated along the route? I mean, that's a lot to disguise.
Well, there was no security in the back of the Texas Book Depository, and I'm assuming you've never been there?
No, I have not.
I've been there twice, and if one looks around, go to the back, and you go up to the bridge, where the bridge is almost like figuratively, literally, where his car eventually speeds and it goes towards Kirkland. There's nobody. I mean, there's no form of security back there. I mean, it would make it very easy for somebody to slip back there and shoot.
Interesting. So there was it's an open route, and you've went and investigated it, and kind of seen that it's, kind of wide open. But from that particular angle, where would these others be angled? Because
my guess is along the railroad bridge, there would be people in the back. There could have been people in the front, down on the grass knoll, right? At literally head level. There's just no other way. There's no other way possible.
Kind of breaking up on me, Sid. I apologize. Your signal
Yeah, I'm sorry too. I'm sorry about that too. What I'm saying is that he didn't act alone, and it would have been easier. It looked a lot easier bringing more people in. I mean, all around. If you went around that whole building, even in the parking lot, it would have been easier to pick them off.
Even in the parking lot. What about this guy Loveday that looked like him that's in some hallway? Are you familiar with this image?
No.
There's this image that was sent to me as we're on to about 833,000 residents. One person has emailed me an image that shows this man Loveday, who looks just like Oswald, standing on the street in some weird hallway trajectory straight on with the motorcade. Wearing a white T-shirt and everything, unless it's all photoshopped. I don't know.
You never know these days with the internet,
Yeah, right. You have to discount a lot. He's got it circled. There appears to be these circles where there's some kind of different things going on, and I do see the Loveday guy, and I see all these variables going on. I'm checking it. It does appear that there is an image. Well, the image could be relative. It seems to be famous, but I don't know. There's so much alteration, disinformation. Clearly, there is something going on. You have Lee Harvey Oswald. He is this supposed communist zealot, and he comes out and he says, I'm a patsy. Then you have Ruby shoot him. Then you've explained that there is this family tree of death, as I said, earlier, using that term, that all of these other individuals have died from it. And even this tie-in with Marilyn Monroe, I mean, what is going on with... Yeah, we're losing you really bad, Sid. Maybe you could try me back in about 5 minutes or so.
Yeah, let me try you back in 5.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Sure.
In talking with Sid, he's brought up some great points about this, and him being at the scene and going down and doing his homework on that like that is something that I have wanted to do, but, it's just been such a long time, and I don't know. There's so many variables. It's psychically, his angle of the Ouija board and looking at it. And I know I've done some things psychically, and I do think that there is some kind of tie-in where he was a loose connection with Marilyn Monroe being a spy and such, but the variables are open and we shall explore them further. And I'm going to take a station break. Winter Lake at winterlake.com, QUE4.org, AM 1710. Even the most ordinary people are required from time to time to make decisions crucial for their own lives, and in such crises they know something of the suspension of the ethical. The choice in such human situation is almost never between a good and an evil, where both are plainly marked as such, and the choice therefore is made in all the certitude of reason. Rather, it is between rival goods, where one is bound to do some evil either way. And that is what is the primus of humanity as we see it. At QUE4.org and AM 1710 in Chicago this evening. And I'm seeing the traffic is wrapped on the freeway immensely. And if you are listening to me on your commute home, I hope you are safe and sound. But it's pretty amazing out here in this large city where a lot of different mob and other activity does or has gone on through the roaring 20s into its perfection within 2000, whatever it is, 13. Earlier today I was out, and as we all are, but someone was asking me questions like, how do you make someone fall in love with you? And I said, well, you can go and get some kind of, accoutrement, and put it on yourself and somehow get near that person. And through a series of tactful kind of responses, if you are the golden girl or boy or whatever, then you can try to seduce them. And the accoutrement assists in that effort. And then another incident that happened today while I was walking down the street is someone says, oh, you're that guy on the radio, this Pentacle-Hours. Can you read my poem? And I said, well, I don't really read poems. I don't find it to be accurate. I've always taken palm reading with a grain of salt. However, I am an excellent palm reader. So this woman, another random encounter on the train, which is just bizarre to me. This woman, I read her poem, and saw that she might be having, coming up on a crossroads, a wall of some kind. And I told her to be cautious throughout the day, and I would want to look into some curse issue that she might have been struggling with. Well, she began to shake, and she was very upset, and she had revealed to me that she was this theater actress and amazing and brilliant and all this kind of thing, and that she was going to have to go up on some issue with audition. And I said, well, we'll see how it works out. And now, during the whole time that we've been on the radio today, she's been blowing up my cell phone because I mistakenly gave her my card, trying to solve whether she is cursed or not. Curses are arbitrary, random, and unexpected. It's not just bad luck. If you have a string of bad luck, it can be righted through certain things that person can do, social cues within the spectrum of our society. It's not something that just happens. In all my readings and things that I've experienced since I was about 5 years old, it's very rare to actually come over or cross someone who is cursed. However, curses do exist and they do work. They're ancestral in nature, meaning they could stream through time and space. They were probably put on by someone who was pissed off. Maybe someone in their family was dabbling in something that they shouldn't have been. Someone was screwed over, a deal went bad, and the witch, or whatever you want to call it, had wanted some recourse. And sometimes legal avenues just aren't open to people, or they choose not to really. In my situation, I don't really have a situation, but in my life, I don't deal with the law. I don't waste my time with the courts, and I don't ask anybody to do anything for me. That's just how I am. Black magic has always settled my scores, and it definitely can settle a score through cursing someone. Warlock I am, warlock I be, a brother to each burning tree, air, fire, water, earth, witness to my warlock's curse. And that's just my attitude about life. You need to rule it. It does not need to rule you. And I think that young lady that thinks she's cursed can stop blowing up my cell phone now. Because I will chat later and see how it all airs out. This is Winter Lake, streaming live at QUE4.org and at AM 1710 for your night commute. And I have a caller from Bill from the north side. Hi, Bill. What's going on tonight?
Not much. Great show, man. It's about time something interesting on the air in Chicago.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate it.
I'm kind of tired of listening to the same old stuff, the politics and the sports. This is fun. I used to have to stay up all night to hear shows like this.
Yeah, this is definitely something different. It's an experiment. We're going to see how it goes and weaves and try to build it. The feedback has been very good. And for our first 4 days, I think it's grown exponentially. And possibly already even hijacked and pirated on other networks. So,
well, I would take that as a compliment then.
I guess just send the check, though, If, somebody's making money on it, we shall see. But then, did you have a question about the JFK assassination?
I did. I'm just an eternal skeptic on those sorts of things. So I guess I'm not seeing the whole conspiracy side.
Is it just that you think that JFK had one shooter, that he managed to make these things occur? Can I ask you this? If you're not a conspiratorial person,
yeah,
what motivated from the mind of the killer, and I mentioned this a little earlier in the show, from the mentality of the killer, if he was this communist zealot, why did he, when he first had his public airing, when they brought him down this police aisle, kind of like some kind of, parading the witch in front of the crowd of pitchfork-bearing whatever, did he say, and actually look through his mannerisms, very frightened and say he was a patsy?
I guess that's the one part of it that falls apart for me. I don't think there was more than one shooter. If there was, they were both behind him. But I sort of have my doubts on the multiple shooter thing. What I will say is I believe that there was a conspiracy. Whether or not it was Oswald pulling that trigger, I believe a person pulled that trigger. I believe it was probably one person pulling that trigger, but maybe part of a wider conspiracy. I just don't, having, I guess I've sort of studied it a little bit, and I've watched the films again and again and again, looked at all the pictures. So I'm stuck on the one shooter part of it, but and I do have to say I'm a real cynic when it comes to the government. So I believe something was behind all this, and there wouldn't be the secrecy. I guess they wouldn't be locking all this stuff up until 2042 or somewhere around then, when most reasonable people will have had the good fortune of dying by then. At least I guess in the government's point of view, but. Yeah, so that's sort of where I am.
It's this thing about Jack Ruby. He was running up on this man. He had access in there, and he shot him. What was his real motive? Was his motive, I'm angry because he killed JFK, or was it a silencing?
Well, he said, Jack Ruby said that he was angry because he killed JFK. And there was all this anecdotal evidence about the girls at his club seeing him just beside himself and upset. But I think some of those emotions can be pretty well manufactured, especially if you're if you're really animated towards killing somebody. You're going to make sure that if you got to do that, you're going to do it. And you can't just do that passively, so you got to. But, Robert F. Kennedy believed up until the time of his death that the mafia was behind the assassination, which I think points to at least an aspect of a behind-the-scenes conspiracy. Whether or not the mafia was used by the government or by the Cubans is a whole other story.
Yeah, because Jack, his brother his brother was Robert Kennedy. Robert Kennedy was investigating the mob, but he was doing it with cat's paws because the father was very heavily connected. But Jack Ruby, it later came out in some investigation, was connected, obviously, some way. I mean, the mob is just a generalized term. I think when the people think, I'm in the mob, there are various groups and cartels at work. Those are organizations, and they each have their own ways to making their own money. They have their figureheads or so on and so on. I have not been able to find exactly what group that Jack Ruby was in. There was something involved with Chicago with Sam Giancana.
Well, because he was connected with the Chicago mob. Remember, he lived in Chicago for a while, and then he moved to Dallas and picked up a club there. I do have, without getting too many details, enough of an insight to know that people move around for favors or with favors in order to make a buck or two here, or to cover a track, or to take care of a buddy. So, I'd imagine there's an element of that.
Yeah, there has to be something going on. What do you think, Jason? Jason has joined me in the studio. What's your opinion of this?
Well, there's definitely a lot of red flags with JFK, and JFK was certainly against secret organizations that have political pull.
I'm having trouble hearing the other guy.
he's don't worry about it. I'm going to let you go, Bill, but I appreciate you calling in.
Thanks. Great show. I'm going to be listening.
Thank you, Bill. Bye.
Bye.
Sorry about that, Bill. Appreciate you calling in again. I am Winter Lake at QUE4.org. And we were just joined by Jason, who appears to be somewhat of a skeptic as well on this issue with JFK. But you don't think there was triangulation of crossfire? I'm a marksman, and I have various different ways of shooting and angles and things and looking at things and and all of this. And I don't think I could make that shot. I don't think I could do it.
Not only is it a difficult shot, but it's a probably improbable shot. the length that they have to go to explain it. It's like explaining the pancake theory with the buildings that fell.
I know. It's very odd. We shall take a call. How are you? You are on the air with Pentacle-Hours.
Hey, how's it going? It's Mark from Louisiana.
Hey, Mark. How is Louisiana this evening?
Ah, nice and humid, bro. It's going to get cold front, though, next week.
So what's your opinion? What is your...
I think Carlos Marcello, what do you know about him?
You know, that name was sent to me in an email, but I don't know enough about it. What is his role?
Okay, he was the mafia in New Orleans for years, the Marcello family.
Yeah, because you're in New Orleans or something.
Bobby Kennedy hated him and had him expedited out of the U.S. And they owned strip joints, and they were friends with Ruby and all that. And it's a really good story, man. You got to check it out. It's the Mafia Kingfish. And Carlos Marcello was in a federal prison in the late 80s, early 90s before he died. And he told a bunch of people that he was Mafia connected, the hit.
But I mean, okay, let's just say, okay, the Mafia or some group wants to kill the president. What is that really going to accomplish? Is that installing, because LB came in sort of with the same line, or did he take it a totally different direction? What was their goal?
Well, the Bobby Kennedy was meddling with the Mafia's business too much, getting in their pocketbook and stuff.
So it was a message.
And it was about, shutting them down, cutting the head off the snake, that's what they said, the Mafia. But Carlos Marcello, his name comes up a bunch, and even in the what was the movie that they made? Remember what's his name?
Well, I kind of discount that film just because I know Hollywood and I know Hollywood fiction.
Yeah, Oliver North. Yeah.
Oliver Stone or something. Yeah, but Oliver North.
A little bit about it, though. They talked a little bit about New Orleans' connection with it, though. But there was a lot more New Orleans and Dallas in there that should have been exposed.
Because there is a connection between those two cities. There always is, and there is a route, a circuitry there for the money and the flow and the drugs, the different.
Mm-hmm.
And so this Marcello, was he running a cartel, or was he just one of the cogs in the death machine?
He had his own little group in New Orleans. He worked with other families from New York, stuff like that. But I think Ruby killed just to shut him up because he was going to rat him out. So we're talking about expose more stuff. And Ruby was supposedly owed a lot of money to Marcello and them. It's interesting. There's all kind of stuff popping up, that people don't really know about.
So
you can read and find out about.
So Ruby owed money. And he
was in some trouble. He was in trouble with Marcello.
Oh, so he settled his debts.
They think that Oswald, got snuffed out. Because anyway, Ruby was dying of cancer anyway. He was going to do a lot of stuff. He was about to die anyway.
Because you know how it is in the game of death, they'll take out your family too. It doesn't matter. So I guess he wanted to settle his debts.
Well, it might have been, But Marcello was in a federal prison in Texas. And before he died, he told a bunch of people that, the JFK hit was part of it, shutting him down. He was part of it, the Mafia. But who knows? We may find out one day.
I don't know.
Hey, I love the show, man. It's interesting.
Hey, thank you for calling in, and you have a good night.
Yeah, we're going to keep listening to you, okay?
Thank you. Bye.
All right, brother. Bye.
So, Jason, this situation is like a giant chimera. There's so many different aspects to it. All of these scenarios, all of this money is owed, and it ends with the death of this president. The president, in my opinion, doesn't really have a lot of power. Some of it explains away my skepticism of it. They kill the president, Kennedy, to send a message, but do you really need to do that drastically? And if his brother is investigating, why didn't they just assassinate his brother? Although later, his brother was killed. And then, although later his own son, in my opinion, some issue went down where his son back in the 90s with his golden wife get in this rickety plane and suddenly fly into a fog bank. That's just these family tree of death, this Kennedy issues just keep going and going, and other ones are disgraced and other ones are brought up on charges. I mean, true enough. I mean, they're obviously, they want to be this playboy mentality, and they're doing all of these nonsensical things, and I have money and I can do whatever I want,
Well, it wasn't just his family members that had been killed mysteriously, but anybody that would have had any involvement at the time with solid proof of the truth. And we still don't know what the truth is. What we do know is that a lot of people, a lot of other people died around that period of time that was a threat to the status quo. And I could probably read off a list of names, or at least start to, but in all honesty, I'm scrolling through these names here.
I mean, what are you looking at? I mean, how many names can there possibly be? Because the more people that know or have some connection, I mean, that's where you lose your... I mean, that's just too broad of a sweeping net. I mean, if you're going to commit a crime, you want to keep it tight. You know what I mean?
And that would support the argument of the one shooter.
That would support the argument of the one shooter.
But my question about that is, if it is a conspiracy and we could agree on that, does it really matter if there was more than one shooter, if the conspiracy involves some fraction of the government or the shadow government?
Well, it does matter because you can see who these other shooters are and what their intent was.
And not that, their affiliation.
The situation for me, I look at this Zapruder film, and I take it with a grain of salt. I do think it's been a doctored thing. There's some kind of modifications. But as I look at it, when it gets to a certain screen, I think it's called 300 or something, section 300 within the film, you see him going down. He's grasping his throat. He's been shot through the throat, JFK. And then he is flung backward from a frontal explosion. And in my opinion, it looks like triangulation of crossfire because you have a bullet that's coming from the front.
That would imply more than one shooter, perhaps. There's also the other question. If you do go on YouTube and research through the videos of the actual event, there is this one video that questionably shows, but more positive than negative, that it was the driver that had the second shot.
That the driver? What are you talking about, driver? How is that?
Well, there's this video where you could see the driver turn over the seat and point something at the president right before the president's head goes back.
But that would be way out of the bounds. Wouldn't they have seen that? There would have been, I mean, Jackie Kennedy herself would have seen that, right?
She would have, but that brings the question, after this event, the family was in protective custody, and I would put quotes around that. What does protective custody mean? If the government hires protective custody, and if it's conspiracy related to the government, does that mean shut up, or if you say something, we threaten your family?
Jackie Kennedy was a very powerful woman, though. I think she was very vocal, although being around those nuts, the craziness, or being threatened by the government, serious. I hear things about people that see things in outer space, these alien things, and they're approached by these men in black or supposed CIA operatives, and they're put the fear of death into them,
Yeah, perhaps there's something greater going on than mankind. When you involve the politics of it, and there's a term for that. Politics that involves extraterrestrials has a term. It's called exopolitics. And a person that is a international judge, PhD out of Harvard, is the guy that founded this term. His name is Alfred Webre, Webre. And I challenge people to look into this guy. He's very humble, and he addresses the issues, but he addresses them in a plausible manner. It's like it could be true, but he's not saying that it absolutely is.
So you're thinking that there even could be extraterrestrial interference? Or
Certainly. There's a couple ideas. One of the ideas is that they've been influencing us for 10,000 years. They're just deep under the ocean.
But that sounds like Scientology is something. I mean, it's...
It could.
That be mankind's influence in the general direction of its causality.
I mean, people that aren't Scientologists come into the same idea. You think they would be leaking this out in the front to get people to
I know so much about that. This L. Ron Hubbard and the White Side Rocketeer and Aleister Crowley and the connectivities with that. But with that, we'll play a little music. Jason, are you an alien hybrid?
Well, aren't we all? Various species, various ethos.
Yeah, I got an email that said that your Weber from Harvard, that gentleman is an alien hybrid. I don't know.
Well, I would imagine that he's mostly human. Is how we identify with humans now.
We'll have to get him on the phone, call him up. I wonder if he can talk from Aldebaran. I don't know. Aldebaran.
Well, I've been seeing a lot of people with blue eyes in like the advertisements. That's the Pleiadians.
What is that?
Well, they're the blue-eyed peacemakers, but all these aliens, their intention of peace, like religions, for example, it's like if you're with us, then there will be peace. There's that division. It's like, can't we just all get along?
But what if I don't want to get along? What if I want to be my chaos agent self? Then I guess I'm exterminated. So there you go. I mean, you either walk that line, we are at peace, or you be exterminated. Right, Jason? Yeah.
Well, it's like if you're not with us, then you must be evil.
This is Winter Lake at winterlake.com, streaming at QUE4.org and AM 1710. We've been discussing today JFK's assassination and also moved over into some alien inverities, which are kind of endless. It seems that all of these tentacles do go there, don't they?
Yeah, religion is just a reflection of the influence, which is extraterrestrial, in my opinion.
Well, then that's Scientology. Are you a Scientologist? Are you?
I don't know anything about Scientology. I'm just going by what I've read and
Your
what I've been acquainted with.
Huh?
Yeah, intuitions.
Yeah. I run into a Scientologist. I run into them quite a bit. It seems they want to convert me, and I know a lot about their founder, and I found him, L. Ron Hubbard, to be a complete fraud and kind of funny. He wrote these tremendously long, arduous, boring diatribes on supposed sci-fi, making them sci-fi fact, and he's created this cult masterfully around him that owns $1 billion in real estate around the world. And of course he's a Hollywood maker of people. A lot of these people follow them, but a lot of the Hollywood people are targeted by the Scientology cult and brought into the group later, and that's when they espouse. So they don't realize that they are resting on their own laurels, their own talents. It's not Scientology that is making them great. It is they themselves making them great. They need to remove the barrier of their perception and see that. But who am I to judge? That is just an opinion, and I'm just, viewing it as my personal observation. We all have a tendency as humans to put something in front of us that we can carry over. It's a form of self-deceit.
Well, it's something interesting, and I do know this much about Scientology, is that they're very secretive about this information, which is interesting when you compare it to the juxtaposition of what the mainstream internet influence is on people's minds related to extraterrestrials. And if yet they're being secretive about it, and then yet this other part of society, which is kind of aligned with them without knowing it, is being real open about it, how does Scientology deal with that? Because they're very protective of their intellectual property.
Yeah, they are. I went to some grandiose complex in Los Angeles. and you get to go on what is known as this device, an e-maker or something, and it checks your system to see if you're clear, and then they come at you with a bunch of doctrines, and they want to sell you a bunch of little accoutrements and programs and little classes, and to me it just looks like a racket.
Well, they definitely are pro-capitalist, and I think if it is true what they're expressing, and there are some truths that they're like hijacking it.
The extraterrestrials. I mean, have you ever tried to build a spacecraft, Jason? You are a technological genius.
I have had curiosities in propulsion systems and altering gravity in a field so you could levitate. I think there's something there as well.
I mean, because you are really